Welcome everybody to a brief segment we're going to randomly start up that we thought of just after our previous recording, and I'm just going to call it the Developing Counseling Shorts. We might come up with a better name at some point, but just to jump right in, we were talking briefly a moment ago about an ethical dilemma that I brought up, so I'm going to pitch it to everybody, and we're just going to go into conversation. So the conversation at hand was, you are in a situation where you are a counselor and a client comes in due to just grief. There are no other disorders that seem to be at play. Psyche seems to be intact. Everything on their MSE is just hitting the mark. Everything's pretty good. For example, they lost their mother, something that's normal, right? And you do your counseling. They're paying in cash, so there's no insurance filing and whatnot. There's no label being put out. They do their sessions and, so on and so forth. You terminate sessions after like 90, 120 days. And then the dilemma I brought up was 7 years down the road, you're at the bar, and this, what was a client reappears, and you're all in casual conversation, and from what you're able to collect from the conversation, they seem to be your person, that person that you've been looking for. When or if is it ethical for you to engage in a private relationship with your client? So I was told that it should be 7 years. I've been told it should be 10 years. I've also been told that you should never, under any circumstances, have a relationship with your clients. And judging by the conversation we had before we actually started recording, there seems to be a little bit of varying information. I feel like it's something that we could talk about briefly. So who wants to start?
So I've heard a variety of different things. And I don't know if things have changed or if I've been given false information, but for a while I believed that you couldn't have any sort of outside relationship, not even romantic, with a counselor unless it was 2 years later, which, thinking about it now as a counselor, is not enough time, right? And then, I've heard that it's also 5 years, which makes more sense. But then, Rizzy, you brought up 7 years, and for me, 7 years just feels like the golden ticket, because after 7 years is when we can, by HIPAA standards, we have to get rid of all paperwork. So there are no more records at that point of any relationship, counseling-wise, with a client. With that being said, I don't think we should ever seek out relationships with our clients. But in this case, it sounds like it was just a random happenstance. We weren't waiting by the phone for 7 years until we could go out and see this person again. It was just a very casual bump in. And I also wonder, and I want to preface this by saying this is not something that I believe
or endorse. We are not endorsing this at all whatsoever. This is just hypotheticals.
Let's say that it's been 7 years, right? And you start this romantic relationship with somebody who used to be your client. If nobody makes a report, does it matter? And again, I don't endorse this. I don't, but it's just,
and that's the thing, because which one of you said that it's the number one for the blacklist?
Oh, it is the number one, the number one ethical violation occurred by counselors, or I don't know what the word is.
I should clarify what the blacklist, what is it, the ACA?
I don't know the exact title, but they take away your licensure and you can't practice anymore.
It's that newsletter they send out each month where it pretty much lists everybody on what they did.
And what you did, and yep.
Bryce, you have the face of thought, but you have not spoken.
Yeah, because I'm I need to know.
So you Googled it?
I Googled it.
Okay.
So, as of the 2014 ACA Code of Ethics, it says sexual and or romantic counselor-client interactions or relationships with former clients, their romantic partners, or their family members are prohibited for a period of 5 years following the last professional contact. This applies to both in-person and electronic interactions or relationships.
Wait a minute. Okay, so that brings up another question. Okay, so let's say I had a client, right? And I have no interest in having a relationship with them because that's weird. But then what if I'm at the bar and I run into somebody who I've never met before, and then they take me to Thanksgiving and I realize it's my client's brother and it's only been 2 years? Do I then have to break off my relationship?
Yeah, I think according to the Code of Ethics.
Interesting.
Yes, but
not if you get married. Then you're contractually bound. I can't legally break off my marriage because I didn't. Some people get
But I
married
think
really quickly.
But I think if you find out and then you get married, that poses some.
There'd probably be an investigation on that.
Correct.
They'd be like, how did you not meet his only brother? Just throwing it out there, but interesting.
That is interesting.
Yes.
Huh.
I also think I was thinking about, like, you said, like, going in for grief. What if it was much more in depth of a diagnosis than that, and you meet up so many years later? Wouldn't you feel like, as a counselor, that you were kind of not taking advantage of them, but that's just like that information that you wouldn't normally know as a new romantic partner? You already know, and it'd be weird depending on the diagnosis or the relationship counseling client that you had.
That's why I brought up the grief one, is because, like, looking at my personal group of clients or list, whatever they would be called, I know as of now there is nobody that I would ever consider even like a friendship with, but they're also in situations where, like, what they're dealing with is I feel like that relationship, I would still kind of be the counselor in that moment, whereas less severe situations such as, like, grief, I don't know, I feel like the dynamic is a little bit different. Like, I just lost my mother, I just lost my dog getting hit by a truck. That's different than I was, you diagnosed me with borderline personality disorder with, so on and so, like, those are two, sorry. You know what? Don't ask. Yeah, it's dark. It happens. Our neighbor's dog did that.
Oh.
Like, and I'm sure those kids are like,
Yeah.
I'm going through it. But, like, those are two different types of things, because, like, you just didn't know how to deal with your grief. If you were in a personal relationship and you weren't a counselor and you happened to come across somebody that happened to be your person, they might just naturally know more about grief and how to help you kind of get through it and be that supportive person. Whereas, like, if you're struggling with OCD and we're giving you, like, management tools and whatnot, like, whole different ball game. So where is there a line to draw? Like,
I mean, clearly there is, because there's a guideline for it, which I think is actually really interesting that, I think that there has to be one, because if there wasn't, people would do whatever they wanted to. But I also think that the year range is interesting for me, or the fact that it's, like, allowed at all, like, that there's just not, like, you should never, under any circumstances, have relationships with your clients, which, again, I don't want to say is unrealistic, because it's there's none of my clients who I've ever seen am I like, in another lifetime, buddy, you and I, like, I've never had that. Never. But obviously, like, we know that it happens even with these guidelines, but I couldn't imagine having seen somebody in some of their most vulnerable times and then going into a relationship knowing that it's already uneven.
Right.
That's why I wanted to bring that up, because it does make it pretty uneven.
Yeah.
What makes me question their mental health as a counselor. Just saying.
That's fair. That is
maybe
fair.
they need to take a break from what they're doing and kind of do some. Maybe they really like to catastrophize, like to be in the chaos.
Yeah,
There's some people that
that's
really
true.
like that.
It makes me think. So there's actually a topic that I had written on our list of things to talk about at some point, of, like, portrayals of counselors in the media, and the one that pops up in my head right now is, if any of you have ever seen How I Met Your Mother, the guy who plays Kumar on Harold and Kumar is a counselor for a season. And he, in the middle of seeing Robin, who's, like, a main character in How I Met Your Mother, is like, I can't be your counselor anymore. And she's like, why? And he explains to her that he's attracted to her. And then they end up dating in, like, four episodes, which 4 episodes is, like, less than a month down the road. And so, like, obviously super bad portrayal of counselors.
Right.
But, like, also, we know that shit like that happens.
From a regulations standpoint, how did they land on 5? Everybody in a room was like, 5 sounds like a good number. I'm comfortable with 5. Are you comfortable with 5?
I'm sure
comfortable
there was
with
some
5.
research
All right,
done.
we've come to agreement. I love that sound.
I'm sure there was some research done, or maybe they looked at the average of how long it took for somebody to violate that.
Oh no!
What's the statistics on how long you can go without having sexual relations with your
Maybe
client?
that's how they came up with that number. I mean, maybe that's why it's so
Is
short
that
of a
ethical
time.
research?
No.
Question mark?
No, no, it's not.
I'm thinking of just like where I was 5 years ago as a person. I would have been 21, entirely different than where I am now at 26. And so like individuals can change a lot in 5 years, but I still like 7 now that it's been brought up because again, there's no paperwork after 7 years. Yes.
I have a theory on why it's 5 and not 7.
Okay.
So, what if... Okay, we all know if you document it, it happens.
Correct.
So, they didn't choose 7 because if you get rid of those documents and something happens, and then there's some hot water and they're like, my therapist had taken advantage of me, they still at least have 2 years for crap to hit the fan and then to go back on those records and, CYA.
That actually makes a lot of sense.
That's my thought. I don't know if that's true. Don't quote me.
That's a good point.
Also, if we have to worry about that, you shouldn't be dating your previous clients.
Wait, I think that's the moral of this story.
It
It is 5.
It is. Well,
but the
like,
real answer is never.
Yeah. And like the other thing too that I want to point out is that like paper files after 7 years, our practice utilizes a automated system. Like we use every practice pretty much has a platform and whatnot, but a lot of places still use paper. I'm transitioning away from paper. I want to use only the online platform because it's confusing when you have to transfer over back and forth, blah, 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 blah. When it's on a platform, who manages when it's deleted? Because technology is kind of forever. If it's all stored in a database or a cloud, does the platform delete it after 7 years? Do you delete it after 7 years? How does that work?
I think that there has to be some sort of archival system. So I have no idea what the databases look like, but I'm thinking of like my current database that I use, and I know that there's like an archival system. I haven't been there for 7 years, so I don't know what happens yet. But, like, that's a good question. I mean, I think that there would have to be a program because that's a HIPAA violation.
Right, and that's the thing that... Because, like, our professor brought up the fact that she lived in a state... I don't even remember what state it was. Moved, like, after she was 2. She moved when she was 2. And, you know this story. And, like... 20-something years later, she moved back to that area, went to the hospital, and they pulled up her records from when she was 2. That's way more than 7 years. That's more than 15 years. So if it's an online platform and database, is it being deleted in the same sense? And is that rule being followed and respected?
But I think that was a diagnosis.
Yeah,
so
that's
diagnosis is different than, like, so-and-so came in today, and this is what they discussed, and this is what we did to work through these issues.
But do we know if that's the only information being kept on a digital platform?
Your insurance keeps your diagnoses. The place of counseling keeps the rest of your files. So your insurance doesn't see what you came in for and what you did. Like, I mean, they have very, very little knowledge, but they keep your diagnoses. And so that's where that lays. Whereas, like, Bryce came in and attended a session. He showed up on time. He was wearing a, age-appropriate attire. He appeared hygienic. Those records go away after 7 years. I don't need to know in 7 years that Bryce wore age-appropriate clothing. Because that could look different in 7 years.
I hope so. Also, so I'm in the transition where when I started... They started a new using a different database after, like, I think it was their 7 years they talked about. There is only one person, because we have to pay for the programs.
Right.
So there is only one person in our facility that can access that. That old program was called CAT. So she can only access that, and she has access to, like, all their stuff on there, like their DA and their diagnosis. But I don't think she has access to their notes. So it's just like general information that we had taken back in 2012. And it doesn't get transferred over to our new system that we use as Credible.
And I think that that's important because if you're diagnosed at, the age of 18 with a personality disorder, that doesn't really go away after 7 years. If you're diagnosed, you know, in elementary school with dyslexia, that doesn't go away. You know, we know that things like depression and things like that, like, they're not always forever, but some things are. So, like, diagnoses are important in that matter, and, like, some of them have to follow you. So I know in my job, we talk about paperwork needing to be relevant, not necessarily recent. And so if your diagnosis is still relevant, then all of that paperwork stands true. If your diagnosis is not, or like your paperwork is not relevant but recent, you know, so I think that's important.
Mm-hmm.
But like the notes and things, so you run into this person at a bar and then 7 years later, like, we don't need to know what they quoted. You know what I'm saying? Like, those
But if
records,
it's still there.
yeah, I don't know.
Also, I think I'm the weirdo because I'm thinking even after 5 years, I do recognize, like, I have a weird thing where I attach myself to, like, things that I know about people.
Yes.
And when I would not be able to, like, detach from that and be like, now let's talk about our lives sexually together versus
Yes.
not professionally together. And that, like, to me, like,
No,
separating it is hard for me to think about, but I think I work with a different population too, where
yeah.
like, this kind of sounds maybe not that great, but like, people in private practice have more boutique clients, maybe not so severely mentally ill, where my people are coming in and they're pretty down and out. So like, I just can't think about having a sexual relationship with
That
them.
makes sense. I also have I've been fortunate. I've never been I never found any of my clients attractive. I've never been attractive to any of my clients. Like, some of them I've been like, wow, if we would have met in a different time or place, maybe we could have been friends. And mostly those are like female clients. But I'm still not going to reach out to them in 5 years and try to be their friend.
Yeah. And like, I'm gonna play devil's advocate, but like, you know, like, you're just sitting there and then you're like,
I'm so mad.
my license is being questioned. Honey, we met like 10 years after you had come to see me for counseling, and now my whole career might potentially be in jeopardy. I don't understand why this situation is occurring. We're living in harmony together.
Is this rain or frying bacon?
It's rain. It's supposed to be rain.
I didn't know if they were talking over breakfast or talking on the porch while it rained. I was just confused.
I think it
both
could be
at the same
either.
time. You know, so like, that's the thing is, I still have my records after 10 years because it's on the digital platform. I don't know.
But you shouldn't, because that is a HIPAA violation.
Yeah.
So you shouldn't after 10, like, that is why your license is being called into question, is because you're not following HIPAA guidelines.
I think.
Oh, someone's racing.
I thought that was you.
No. No, I did not. That was a car outside.
Oh.
Oop.
I think for me it's a little different because we have like a system that we put all of our like notes in. I mean, I have my personal notes, which at the end of the school year I delete, but which I probably should. Well, if it's just like met with this student, we talked about their class, I delete it at the end of the school year. If it's more important, I make their own file, like on my Google sheet, you know. But the student profile, because we are a public school, we have to keep records of K to 12, like, you know, 7 years past they graduate, then we get rid of them. So it's a little different for me because we literally have to keep them for the first, you know, until they turn 18 and then 7 years after that. So it's a little different. But my personal notes, if it's like regular stuff, I just delete it right away. Like, but, you know, and then usually after student, let's say this student goes to they go to ninth grade, they go to a high school counselor, I'll like give that counselor their information and then I'll delete it off mine. So me, I guess it's a little bit easier for me to follow HIPAA because they're easier ways for me to do that.
You, being in a school, actually have to follow FERPA.
Yeah.
And FERPA is entirely different
Yeah.
because that's a need-to-know basis.
Yes.
But
Yep.
even still, like, those 504 records that you had mentioned in, like, the last podcast recording, those follow them because then they come to college campuses and they bring them to my office. And so, like, that's still relevant information. But then, you know, after 7 years, it goes away. Like, they might still have physical copies of it. but it's like null and void at that point.
What a full circle moment that was.
Right.
That was
Honestly,
beautiful.
yeah.
Right. Also, for frame of reference, for people that come along, this is being recorded after episode 2, Sex, Drugs, and Ethical Dilemmas. Part of the reason we're doing this is because we're having great conversation after recording, and we never got to the sex part of the title for
Or the
my
ethical dilemma.
podcast. I feel like we got
Kind of an ethical
There
dilemma,
was
but
some of it in there, but like the weed part was kind of ethical dilemmas.
that's true.
So,
Please
but,
check
like,
out episode 2, Sex, Drugs, and Ethical Dilemmas of The Developing Counselor.
Yeah, and follow us on Facebook, and
We're getting an
Well,
Instagram page.
we are getting an Instagram. Are we
Ooh.
getting a Twitter?
I don't Twitter.
No.
I
I
loathe
can't.
Twitter
I
is
loathe
too
it.
political for me.
Yeah, I don't-
loathe Twitter.
I haven't had Twitter. Actually, I haven't had Twitter since our ethical class or our ethics class, the very first semester of the Mac program. I literally deactivated my entire Twitter in class one day because I felt attacked.
Fair.
Oh.
All right. Well, great conversation, guys. We did it.
Yay!
All right, we'll see you in the next. We'll blip recording.
Thanks, guys. We'll LP see you later.
Oh no, I keep forgetting that. You're so good at that.
Thanks.
Thanks.